Welcome to the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the Halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years. Tzurba volumes are available for purchase worldwide on Amazon. And to learn more about Tzurba, or for those in Eretz Yisrael looking to purchase volumes, please head over to tzurbaolami.com. For more information, see the description below. And now, Rabbi Shalom Rosner.
Okay, here we go with the Halachot of Lash. We are in volume number 19 of the Tzurba series, the Lax Family Edition, and the Aaron Family Volume. We're up to Shiur Gimel in the volume, page 113, the Halachot of Lash. We've discussed Borer, a couple of Shiur, and we discussed Tochein in the last Shiur, grinding. And now we talk about Lash. Lash is kind of the opposite of Tochein. Tochein, if you remember, was grinding something, taking one item, one unit, and breaking it into small pieces. Lash is kind of the opposite. Lash, kneading, where I take a number of separate, independent pieces and put them all together through a liquid medium. That is the Halachot of Lash. If you look on page number 13, the creation of a mixture of two or more substances to form one unit. Right, it was done in the Mishkan. The creation of the curtains to make the dyes for the Mishkan. So we'll discuss some of the nitty-gritty background to Lash, and this comes up when making cereal for a child, making tuna fish, making egg salad, any of the like. We're going to see that Lash does not have the limit of Gidulei Karka, as we saw in the Malach of Tochein. Ein Tochein el Gidulei Karka, and therefore Tochein does not apply to eggs or the like, only items that grow from the ground. But Lash doesn't have such a limit, as we will see. So Lash, in general, if one thinks about it, really consists of two stages. One stage of the modern kneading, right? And one is when you add the liquid, add the water to the flour. That's stage number one. So right when I do that, there is some type of binding that starts. The question is that the Halachot of Lash? Is that enough for the din d'oraisa of I added the liquid, I didn't actively knead it, but is that enough? That's stage number one. And stage number two is the actual kneading the water and the flour together by hand. So what is the Lash midaraisa? So l'chora, for sure, the second stage. That's what we call kneading, when I am mixing the flour and the liquid together. But what about stage number one? So that, as we will see, is a machlokas tanoim. And a machlokas rishonim, how we paskin based on that machlokas tanoim. The Mishnah says in Shabbos, in the 24th parak of Dalad Mishnah Gimel, source number one, you have it there on page 113. V'nosnin mayim lemursan. A person is allowed to add water to bran on Shabbos, avalo govlin, but you can't knead it. So you would be able to do stage one, what we call of kneading, but not stage two. So the Gemara says, really, this is a machlokas tanoim, and the Mishnah, who says it's mutter, stage one, is the shita of Rabbi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says it's mutter. Kneading is only active kneading, what we call stage two. But stage one, just adding the liquid to the solid, is not Aser da'oraisa, and maybe it's even mutter, says the Mishnah. Amar Abaye, the Gemara tells us, Amrite Kami Damar, Masni San Mani. Who is the Mishnah like that says you are allowed to add a liquid to a solid? V'amar li Rabbi Yehuda. It's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Titania, because the Brisa says, Echad nosin esakamach, ve'echad nosin l'tocho mayim. If somebody has flour and water, Rebbe says you add the water, whatever you put in, that's going to be chayav. Rebbe Yehuda Nasi Shita, Rebbe holds even stage one is also daraisa, because that already starts the binding process. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ein Chayav Ad Sheyigabel. Rabbi Yehuda says no, not until you actively knead are you going to be chayav, and that's the shita of the Mishnah. The Mishnah there in the 24th parak of Shabbos holds like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Who do we paskin like? Rabbi Yehuda is more meko. He says only stage two. What about stage one? So the Rif says, since the Mishnah, the Stam Mishnah in Shabbos is like Rabbi Yehuda, it must be paskin that way, and that's what the Rosh paskins, that's what the Rambam paskins, and many other Rishonim, and that seems to be Me'ikar Adin. We'll see other Rishonim, but we'll see later on, Be'ezus Hashem, that there are certain, sometimes we'll see, well, we can be Meiko, because Me'ikar Adin, we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that kneading is only stage two. If you look in the Rif says in Daf Samach Zayin Mabez Nadafi Rif now page 114. Umi de Kamar Tzartzina and Aliyah de Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Shmamina de Hilchos Kavasei. We pass like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, adding liquid to solid is not aser de oraisa. We'll see, according to others, the Bir Alach and other Achronim, even Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda might say it's aser midrabanan. But it's not aser daraisa, but it's going to make a difference whether something is daraisa or not. If you look in the Sefer Yereim, Rebbe Elazar Mimetz, Talmud of Rabbeinu Tam, Rebbe of many of the great Ashkenazic Rishonim, the Mordechai, the Sefer HaTruma, says the Sefer Yereim, which is organized like a Sefer HaMitzvos, but he has a lot of halacha in there too. So he says we paskin like Rebbe when he's against one other person. Halacha k'Rebbe mechaveiro v'lo mechaveirav. So here too, just adding a little bit of water onto flour would be a problem. Mida araisa, and that is shitas Rebbe. Says the Yereim, halosh, tolda nesinas mayim below tarovas kli. Adding liquid, adding water to a solid. Shabbos, and he goes to machlokes that we'll get to between Misham and Hillel, but adding dye to a liquid before Shabbos, but you can't do it on Shabbos. You can't even add dye to water. V'yavagav detan mishechshech nosin mayim lamursin avalokov lin lo kaimalon kavase diachida hid Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda mukmin lahasam. That mishnah that we saw, 24th parak, is only Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. It's a singular shita. V'halacha karebi mechaveiro, and halacha is that Rebbe beats when he argues an individual. V'o Beisham Esila pligi ale b'perek rishon, and Beisham Esila argue within Rebbe Shita in the first parak. So major machlokas rishonim about this machlokas Tanaim, and the Shulchan Aruch Paskins quotes both opinions. Shulchan Aruch in Shin Chav Dalet Sif Gimel, source number 5. Ein govlin mursan libehema ola tarnagolim. One is not allowed to knead together. One wants to feed their animals on Shabbos to make the bran. Aval nosim b'mayim, you can't put liquid in, just pour the liquid in, and that's okay for the animals. Yesh osrim l'temayim agav immersim b'Shabbos, and some say it's also even just to do that, like the shita of Rebbe. Va'ayin la'el simin shin chaf aleph sif tes yudvav. Excuse me, Gabishum B'chardal Ketzanogim. So the Mishnah Shulchan Aruch quotes both opinions. The Mishnah Berurah says that when the Ramah says Ayin La'el, he's saying that the Ashkenazi custom is to be machmir. The Mishnah Berurah notes that there in Shin Chav Dalet, Ritzono Lamar Desham Nispar Denogim Lahachmir Kisvara Svaras Balat Shuma. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes both opinions. The Ramah says we're machmir. So what does the Shulchan Aruch say? Which one will we paskin like? So often the rule is if the Shulchan Aruch quotes one stam deya and the second one as a yesh osrim, so that would indicate that we pass like the first opinion, and that's what Rabbi Ovadia Yosef says, that one can be lenient me'ikar adin because the second view is said as a yesh omer. But Rabbi Tzion Abba Shaul says no. The second view though holds that it's an issa daraisa. The second view says that even just adding liquid, maybe we should be machmer like Rebbe Shita. So if the second opinion is a potential issa daraisa, then even svardim, says Rabbi Tzion Abba Shaul, should be machmer. That's what he says in Shuvas Or Letzion, source number 7. Kivan shaladah sefer atruma va'od rishonim aser min haTorah b'chol ofan. It's aser. Umaran hevi devreim sham b'sif tesva v'shem yesh omrim. And the Shulchan Aruch does quote that opinion of the Isser Daraisa. Ul devreim lo mahani shinui. We'll get to that. Ein lahakel lecharchila v'lismach adas Rambam. Don't rely on the Rambam and the Rif and the Rush, who all, even though they're the major poskim, even though they all paskin like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Lakula, but because the other day is the Chumrah and it's quoted in Shulchan Aruch, one should be machmir. And therefore, says the Shmir Shabbos, halach halamaisa, one may not pour liquid onto food or food into liquid. Right, if they're going to start sticking together on their own accord, as we said, that's the svara of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, of Rebbe, that it already starts connecting, even if I didn't do anything. But we'll see. If it was made before Shabbos, then I'm allowed to add more liquid and mix it. Adding more liquid to a mixture already, that's the opposite of lush. That's diluting it more, and I'm allowed to mix it. Shnei chomrim, says the Shmir Shabbos, Rav Neuwirth. Shnei chomrim, shenis arbavu v'nidbeku lefnei Shabbos. If somebody already added liquid to a salad, there's a mixture from before Shabbos. Mutter lahosav alei masha, I can add liquid because that's the opposite. That's thinning. That's diluting. V'gam la'arbe v'osam kiragim mosachol, and also to mix it up. To mix it up because again, I'm ultimately going from a thicker to a thinner mixture, and that's allowed. Ve'ein bazeh mishim miser lisha. But not to do it so strongly, just benachas. V'lachein chemas botnim shenifra mimena shuman, or if it's right in the factory it was made. Let's say somebody has peanut butter, and some of the oil of the peanut butter rose to the top. And when you serve the peanut butter, you want to serve it together. You are allowed to mix that together because that's already mixed from before Shabbos. One is allowed to mix that in on Shabbos. One can make it more diluted. One can't add in new solid because then it's going to make it thicker, and that's the malacha of Lash. The Pnini Halacha just ends off by saying that, and this is what others say as well, if one makes a mixture, but there are solid, independent pieces that are clearly there, but it's not really connected. Somebody makes an Israeli salad on Shabbos with oil poured onto the Israeli salad. Is that going to be the Malacha of Lash? We discussed Tochin about how finely and small you could cut the pieces, but that's not Lash. They're not connected. They're separate, independent pieces of vegetables. Says the Pnei Halacha. Od klal tzarach ladas. There's no Lash when the pieces are independent. It's the malacha that puts together and unifies the dried pieces, that they will be connected together. If it's just in a liquid like oil, so then that wouldn't be the malacha of Lash, and that's why the Mishnah also says adding liquid to a salad, pouring a dressing onto salad is not going to be Lash. As we'll see later, also there are other examples of this. Coleslaw, as we'll see, that's another example that's not Lash. You see each piece independently. Ubiyera kanikra shlatin, says the Mishnah Berurah in ladaktik b'cholzeh kivin shein chotchenoso dak dak. That is step number one of Lash. I'll just add also similar. We'll get to it later, but I'll mention once we're talking about the Yesodos. Let's wait. Let's wait with that. That gets into the thickness of the mixture, which we will see. So, category number one, machlokas tanoim, machlokas rishonim, about that machlokas tanoim, what we paskin, different stages. Next, there are types of mixtures, as we start on page 118, that gets a little tricky. What happens if there are types of mixtures that are not mixable? Like even if you mix it all together, it's not mixable. It's not going to become a unit. So is that subject to Lash? Is that not subject to Lash? So let's see. There are a number of shittas here that we will go through, and then hopefully afterwards we'll be able to talk lamaisa about how it is. So the Mishnah tells us in Masechah Shabbos in the first parak that there is a machlokas Tanah Beis Hillel about whether one is allowed to leave ink to soak over Shabbos, and the context there is because it's going to your kli is going to be doing malacha for you on Shabbos. Even though you put it in before Shabbos, that gets into Shvisas Kalim, right? But I'm going to be dyeing something on Shabbos. But the Gemara, that's the Machloka Beis Shammai Hillel. Beis Shammai says in the first parak, Beis Shammai Omrim, source number 11, Ein Shorin Diyo v'Samamanim v'Charshinim, Ela Kadesh Yeshru Mibod Yom. It has to be done beforehand on Friday. It has to be soaked and colored. Beis Hillel Matirin. And Beis Hillel says it's mutter. But it's pretty clear from the Gemara that you can't do this on Shabbos. The machlokas is, if it's done before Shabbos, could you leave it? And the issue is Shvisas Kalim. Can your Kli do it for you on Shabbos? Beis Shammai, no. Beis Hillel, yes. Because we paskin, there's no Isser Shvisas Kalim. But everybody would agree that you can't do this on Shabbos. Why not? What would be an issue of soaking the ink on Shabbos? That's the question. Machlokas, Reb Yosef and Abaya. So this is Machlokas, Reb Yosef and Abaya about this Mishnah. This Mishnah that everybody seems to assume that it would be usher adding water to ink without any additional action, right? That would be soaking and that would be usher on Shabbos. Mantana, Nesidas Mayim L'Dio Zui Shvi Yasan. So the first opinion of Yosef says this must be Rebbe Shita. Rebbe who holds that even just adding the liquid to the flour. Stage 1 of lush. Rebbe holds that's aser da'araisa, so too here. Adding ink to the water is going to be, and soaking it is going to be aser. Rebbe hi detanya echanosin esakemach v'echanosin esamayim ha'achron chayev divrei Rebbe. We're assuming this ink also is not just coloring like making tea, because as we're going to see, that's not lush if it's not thick at all. But that's Rabbi Yosef's shita. Rabbi Yosef says it's like the Mishnah is according to Rebbe, and Rabbi Yossi Omer. That's Rabbi Yossi Omer. That's Rabbi Yosef. Abaya argues. Abaya says, sorry, in this case, is Rabbi Yossi going to say? Rabbi Yossi is going to say here that it is allowed. Amalei Abaya Dilma Ad Kalan Kamer Rabbi Yossi. When does Rabbi Yossi say it's allowed to just add the liquid only by something that is kneadable? Ela bekemach de bar gibel, by flour which can be kneaded. So there, that is putter by stage 1 and only chayev by stage 2. Avol diyo de lav bar gibel, but ink which cannot be kneaded. So then maybe soaking, that's the whole malacha. And therefore, maybe even Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Huda would agree that one should be chayiv. One should be chayiv in this case. The Gemara then rejects that. Lo sal kadaitach, it can't be, because you see, Rabbi Yossi says a shita even by afer, by ashes, which is not kneadable with a K. And the Gemara ends up by saying, no, maybe that ashes, that afer in that brisa means afar and not dirt, which is kneadable and not afer. So the Gemara goes back and forth, and it's not clear at the end, Lamaisa, which opinion should be accepted la halacha in terms of something that is not kneadable. So what do we say in that case? The Rambam says lekula. The Rambam says the malacha of lush does not apply to ashes, something that is not, again, if I take ashes and I mix it in liquid, it's not going to connect and bind. So ashes, bran, and other substances, even if one tries to knead them, not a problem. The Rambam, Hilchot Shabbos Ches Tezayin, source number 13, page number 119. Ve'ein gibel be'efer, v'lo b'chol agas, v'lo b'mursan, v'lo chayotze b'hen. That's the Rambam's Mekel Shita. Meaning, even the Shita of Abaya. What did Abaya say? If it's not kneadable, then everybody would agree, chayiv. The Rambam says no. If it's not kneadable, everyone would agree mutter. And in the footnotes it points out here, it's probably based on a Gemara in Beitza on Daf Lamed Beis. The Ravid assumes that the Rambam made a mistake. The Rambam's like, what are you talking about? It's mamish against the Gemara. The Gemara says if it's not kneadable, then everybody would agree. Even Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda would agree chayiv, because that's its binding. While the Ravid says no. The Gemara never said that the ash cannot be kneaded. Rather, it does not need to be kneaded. So the Ravid argues. Other Rishonim are machalik between something that's not needed to be needed. Something is not needed, N-E-E-D, to be needed, K-N-E-A-D. Something that doesn't need to be needed, and something that needing won't even help it. Meaning, does it bind automatically, or does it never bind even if you tried? By the former, maybe that's what the Gemara is talking about. And by the latter, maybe that's the Rambam. That's what the Tosas read, how the Tosas read is machali. Because after all, Tosas read says, what's the source of kneading? What's the source of kneading in the Mishkan? As we just said, that's by the ink. The Rambam doesn't say that that's not going to be chayiv. That's the classic case from the Mishkan. The Rambam says by afer and chol agas, by those that are not kneadable even if you tried. So that's where the Rambam would say mutter. But somebody that is doesn't even need the kneading because it binds automatically, so that would be a problem. That's what the Tosas Rid says. If you look here in Shabbos, Daf Kuf Nun Hey, in the next source. V'lo domi legibel de diova samamanim damrina lav gibel hu. That's not gibel. De legibel mursan. Legibel mursan. De labar gibel hu. De bevada begibel de mursan. The gibel of the bran lekachi of chatos shein derech olam legavlo. That's not. You try to knead it together and it just doesn't connect. It doesn't unify. Avol dio. But if you have these herbs that are in the water, even though it's not the derech ha'olam to be megabel ika chiyav chatas, That was what was done in the Mishkan, and there is binding that happens, right? And he says again, the Shnei Mini Gibulim. There are two types. Hem Gibul HaKemach, K'dei Lasos Isa, V'chayotze Bo. Right, that's the to make a mixture like flour and dough, and that's the number one. And then the other type of kneading ink and dyes is to soak them to give color to the water, and one doesn't normally knead them into dough. Okay, that's the chiluk. The Bir Halacha summarizes this also, and he says that lush does not apply to substances that cannot be kneaded, like afer, like the Rambam says. And the other sheet, like the Ravid sheet, is that maybe if you do this, even just adding water to them would be chayiv deoraisa. The Chazon Ish is not convinced of that machmir shita of the Ravid. But either way, this is all some of the background to lush and the different materials, right? Most of what we're going to be talking about, lamaisa, are items that are kneadable, they do combine when you add the liquid medium. There is an interesting discussion. What about, is there lush? This is all background, and we'll get to the lamaisa cases, even though this is a lamaisa case. What about lush in a fruit's own natural juices, right? What about mashing a banana? What about mashing an avocado? So we spoke about the mashing part of it in tochen. In tochen, in grinding, is mashing the normal, way of grinding. But what about regarding the lush part of it? There's liquids. That's part of its natural. So does lush require external addition of a liquid, or even a vegetable in its own liquids? So says the Chazon Ish in Siman Nunches on page number 123 now in source 18. Yesh la'ayin peros hanidbakin l'gush echad. Ayadei risukan, avocado, any of these, it connects to each other based on its own liquids. Osha sharfan maruba, its liquid is a lot. Acha misarvin kugush echad. Im yesh berisukan mishum lush, is crushing it, mashing it, and now it's going to bind together. Is there lush there? L'chora. Kivan de beinosin latochan mashke beinosin latochan meperes chashav lush kinosin latochan mayim shal asmanami. So maybe it should be a problem. There's liquid here; it's bound together with the liquid, so it should be a problem. The efshar, but then says the Chazon Ish, maybe not. De ein suras lisha ela benosin mashke ladavar hayavish. Lisha means you take liquid, you take solid, you put it together. That's the malacha of lush. But where you just mush something together by itself without adding anything external. Aval kirise pere avshu mizdabik b'meimav, even if it's connected to its own juices, lav shem lush alav v'chenira, says the Chazon Ish. I don't think that would be a problem. Rav Moshe Feinstein also assumes that it's not a problem in Orach Chaim. Rabbi Shalom Rosner is not as convinced of it, but it seems that then a number of the achronim are mekel. Next yesod, right? We're doing all the yesodos of lush. Number one, we spoke about when is lush? Just adding the liquid to the solid together, or only actual kneading it? Number one. Number two, we just spoke about different types of substances that are mixed in. Number three issue, different types of mixtures. And this gets into nitty-gritty lush. There's two types of mixtures, as we'll see. Belila ava and belila racha. As we will see, thick mixtures and thin mixtures, different types of mixtures. We will see also in this section that shinui could play a role by lush. Even though, as we have said, usually shinui, doing something in an unusual way, just knocks a malacha down from a daraisa to a darabanan. But in certain malachos, shinui removes the entire tzura of the malacha and it becomes mutter, not just darabanan. Because remember, a shinui is not malachas machshavas. I didn't do it in a professional way. So sometimes Chazal could say that even though usually shini is a derabanan, but if I don't do it in a professional way, maybe this isn't even the malacha. So writing in an unusual way, we assume that's the malacha midrabanan, because it's close enough to writing. But as we'll see by lush, if there's different types of shinuyim, a shinui could undermine the entire tzura of the malacha. So one of the factors that whether shini works or not in that case is the level of thickness of the mixture. The Gemara in Shabbos talks about kneading roasted flour or other types of a grain product called a shatis. Gemara Shabbos, Kufnin Hey, Kufnin Vav, source 19. Taner Rabbanon in Govlin as a Kelly, V'Yishomer Govlin. Machlokes whether we need the Kelly. Man Yishomer of Chazer Rabbi Yehuda. As we said, Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says that you're allowed to. The one that says you're allowed to just add the liquid. V'Hani Mili Huda Meshani. As long as a shinui is done. Shinui is done. Hechi Meshani, Amar of Chizda, Al Yad, small amounts. That's a little difficult to put our finger on because what's small? What's the usual amount of what's small? We'll see. But everybody agrees that one is allowed to mix the shatis on Shabbos. Vatanya ain't govlin. Some say you can't. Lo kasha habe habaracha v'hanimilu meshani. Thick or thin? How thick is the mixture that comes out? Right? If somebody is making iced tea on Shabbos, there's no lush there. You put powder in because it ends up being a liquid. That's not even belila racha. That's not a softer, pourable mixture. That's nothing. That's liquid. There's no lush by liquid. But within solids, there's belila of a belila racha. We're going to talk about this maybe in the future when we discuss the malacha of mimachik, mimareach. Also, there's a chilik between thick and thin mixtures. But the Gemara says here that by a certain types of mixtures, we would say, even according to Rebbe, let's say, by a thin mixture, racha, a soft mixture, a thin mixture, one could do a shinui. What's a shinui? Heichi meshani. So Rav Yosef says shinui is the order of what you put in the bowl. What do you put in the bowl first? Normally, flip it. Put the other thing in the bowl first, and that is a shinui for at least stage one of the malacha, right? Because Rebbe holds that the stage one of lisha, just adding the liquid, this all together, that is the malacha of lash. So doing a shinui in that stage would be enough for Shitas Rebbe. Amar Rav Yosef, Bachol Nosres Lachometz, Vachacha Nosres Lashasis. On weekday, first you put in the vinegar and then the shasis. B'Shabbos, flip it, Nosres Lashasis, Vachacha Nosres Lachometz. Put in the solid first. Put in the solid first, that's a shinui. Because the normal way of doing things in the days of the Gemara was putting in the liquid first. So Lamaisa, the Gemara says there are two kulas here. According to the first line, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, then needing a small amount. A little bit is mutter, and there's namachalik between palila ave palila racha. Sounds like small amount. There's always mutter. We're just not going to know what small amount is. That's the problem. And according to Rabbi Yossi, according to the second view, which is not limited to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, if I have palila racha, a softer mixture, and I flip the order of the ingredients, that would be allowed. There's a lumdis why that is. Rashi says there in Shabbos Kufnun Vav, palila ava is the only malacha of lash. Lush means thick mixture, like a dough. But blila racha, Rashi says, ein zulisha. That's not lisha. There's no lisha, according to, even according to Rebbe, that it is aser daraisa, even stage one, but it's only if it's going to end up being a thick mixture. The Rambam seems to have a different way of understanding it, but we'll leave that for now. Trumas Hadeshen, Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin teaches us another type of shinui. The Gemara mentions the shinui of the order of what you put into the bowl. But the Trumas Hadeshen says, according to Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, lush is violated by stage two, by kneading. The first stage, it's not lush yet, right? So you need to make a shinui in the lush. Remember, Me'ikar Adin, Rambam, Rif, Rush, passing like Rabbi Yehuda. The real lush is the actual kneading. So it says that you have to do a shinui in the actual kneading, and that is in the stirring itself, not just the order of how you put the ingredients into the bowl. How do you do that? So usually, how do you stir? You have a spoon and you go around and around. So what's a way that you could do a shinui? You don't use anything. You just take the bowl and you shake it. You shake the bowl. So that is a shinui, or you do it with your finger. Do it with your finger. Both of those are shinuyim. Says the Trumas Hadeshen. Again, as I mentioned, Trumas Hadeshen, Rabbi Yisrael Isserlin, almost every one of his shuvas is quoted in Shulchan Aruch. He's one of the major bases of Minhagei Ashkenaz, but also a lot of his shuvas are quoted in the Shulchan Aruch. Remember, he did it right. He wrote his shuvas. He wasn't asked them. He wrote it in question and answer form. Very important shuvas. Says the Trumas Hadeshen 22. Nira da'afilu biblila racha. Even in the soft, in the less chamor type of mixture. You can't just flip the order. You have to mix it in an unusual way. The aliba demanta amar because according to the opinion that just putting in the water, it's not considered gibel. It doesn't matter if we pass on like Rabbi Yehuda Meker did. Only stage 2 is lush. So what difference does it make? What happens at stage 1? It's like if you walked into your house with the food backwards. Who cares? That's not lush yet. So too, just the switching the order of the ingredients in the bowl, it's not lush yet. That's too early. So the Tzurba Hilchot says you have to do it in you have to have a shinui in the actual mixing stage. Lo mahani to avid shinui b'nesias machal. De'akati lo avid malacha sheyagabel being in shinui begibul. You need shinui in the gibul itself, and that's what the Ramah says. The Ramah quotes the Tzurba Hilchot, not just switching the order, but switching the gibel itself. V'im, says the Ramah, Shin Chaf Aleph Sif Tezayin, source 23. V'im nosein ha'ochel tchila v'yachar kach hachometz. One shinui. You put in the ochel first, because remember in the days of the Gemara, putting in the liquid first that was normal. So put the salin in first, and then the chometz. O ayayin o ma'arbavo be'etzbo, and you mix it with your finger. Shari davishini kamosha b'shtisa la'el. That is a shinoi. Remember, the Shulchan Aruch does not quote this shinoi. The Shiur Shabbos, or before that, the Drisha suggests that the Shulchan Aruch does not agree, and he said the Rif and the Rambam do not require any type of shinoi alteration in the stirring. So interesting, even though they say that real daraisa lush is only stage 2, but even a stage 1 shinoi, there would also still be an effect of that as you are stirring. So, summing up, the Shmir Shabbos sums up here in Paraches, source 24, the Balila Ava. Balila Ava, a thick type of mixture that ends up with like oatmeal, very thick, or children's cereal that's very thick. Asr l'hakin b'Shabbos. That's an Issur D'Oraisa, v'gam Balila Racha. And even Balila Racha, Asru Chacham Lachina b'Shabbos, Midrabanan. One shouldn't make that on Shabbos. But one can make the more liquidy. We'll define that a little bit better by the Shem soon. One can make that on Shabbos if one does this shinuyim. So the Shmir Shabbos says here we are in source 24 that one work should require lachatchila the 2 shinuyim. Yeshana es seder nesinas hachamrim. Number 1, to switch the order of what you put in. Klomar in biyamosa cholu ragalitenas hamashke. If on a weekday you usually put in the liquid first, or achomer mechel mashke b'toch chomer yavesh, or you put it in azay yafocha seder b'Shabbos. Switch it. Switch whatever you put in. Do the opposite here. V'chein lahefech. But put it all in right away in one shvicha. So again, we're assuming now Balila Racha, which is the Balila Avet, the thicker one should never try to do, unless we'll get to Tzara Gadol. But Balila Racha, if it's more liquidy, so then that's at most a Durabanan, and therefore one could do one of the Shinuyim. But the Shmir Shabbos is noting here, when you're pouring in the liquid, you should do it all at once. If one pours it in little by little, so then at the beginning it's thick. It's thick before you get more and more liquid. So you should pour it in right away. So the blila is a racha even at the beginning. And number 2, yeshaneh ba'ofan habachisha. And number 2, how you mix. So how do you mix? As we said, either shake the whole thing or do it with a finger, or, as we'll see, there's another example of shesi and arev, which means not a circle, but go one way and then the other way and then one way and then the other way. And the Chazon Ish says, take out the spoon each time. Yeshaneh ba'ofan habachisha. Klomer sheyivachish be'etzbo adei ne'anu akli hayahechach livchosh bekli. Mix it shesi and arev. Vafilu kama pa'amim v'tov, and it's better because if you don't take out the spoon, whatever you're mixing it with, then you're going to go a circle to get back to the shesi and the arev. So that's why it's better, says the Shmir Shabbos, shiotzienu min ha'tarov es ben ha'shesi v'arev. Take it out between each time. Ramosha Levi here in the Menuchas Ava says it's okay to have one shinui. You don't need both shinui, but again, lachatchila, one should try both shinuyim. Again, if you want to already put it in and it's already mixing, okay, then do the second shinui if possible. What happens if you're not sure about the specific order, or there is no specific order? You don't know what's put in first. There's no specific order. The Taz has a chumra gedola. The Taz says, okay, you're stuck. If there's no clear shinui, then you can't do it. No shinui is possible. That's the Taz. Here in Orach Chaim Shin Chaf Aleph, amazing chumra. Says because it has to be clear that it's a shinui, and because it's not clear what the normal is, so then there's not going to be any shinui. Bekemach shel matzah ein derech yadua ma nosin tchila b'chol kedei leida mahu hashinui. Al kain, says the Taz, aser b'shabes b'chol gavni sherotze la'arev b'sakin o b'kaf hakemach shel matzah. You're stuck. That's the chumra of the Taz. Achronim, the Mishnah Berurah, says no, that's hard to believe. There has to be a shinui. So if you're not sure, go by the shinui of the Gemara. Remember, the Gemara says they always put in the liquid first, so put in the solid first. The Mishnah Berurah quotes that from Eliyahu Rabbah and the Chok Yaakov. Just do the order prescribed by the Gemara, putting in the solid first. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Eliyahu Rabbah Kasev Demein Yadua Yasa Shinui de Mefarish beGemara Shitein Machal Tchila ve'Achar Kach Hamashke. If you're not sure if there is no regular order, then put in the liquid first. That is the chilek. Okay, says the final point here. What's thick? What's thin? What's racha? What's aveh? So we know, for example, in Hilchos Brachos, rach and aveh, there's a chilukim. If it's drinkable, so then that's shahakol. If it's not drinkable, if it's thicker, if you have it like a soup, a thick soup, that's going to be, make the bracha of hadama or whatever type of soup it is. So are those rules also applicable to Hilchos Lash? That's a machlokes achronim. The Chazon Ish says no. The Chazon Ish says no. It goes by whether it is pourable or not. If it is pourable, even if it's thick, that's going to be belila racha. That's more of a kula. It's already blila racha if it's pourable. Says the Chazon Ish here in Orach Chaim, page source number 28. Nira deracha haynu de nishpach v'nirok avalakati ein gush v'lo nozal. Liquidy, that's not racha. Liquid is liquid. That's the lush is in shayach by liquid. Avalamayim merubim v'hein rakamayim achurim. If it's dirty water, ain't no klal b'shem lush. That's not lush. Miyum nishkayin b'shuli akadera umis akvin. Maybe if it's you have a bunch of on the bottom of the liquid, maybe that could be lush there, but that's din racha. And that's what most assume, like the Chazon Ish, the Aruch HaShabbos, and the Rav Gribiad, and elsewhere, and others. The Menuchas Ava here, the Rav Moshe Levi, paskin like a Kos HaShulchan. No, maybe it's similar. Maybe it goes by liquidy. It's hard to know then. If that's blila racha, then what's liquid? Mamish liquid is going to be, has to be drinkable. It's safe to say, similar to Hilchos Brachos. So that's a little tricky. Okay, b'makom tzarech, leniencies in case of need. You have it in the next section on page 131. Makom tzarech. So we saw that again. We try to be machmir like the shita of Rebbe, lechadchila, like the Shulchan Aruch quoted both opinions, and we try to be machmir like Rebbe, who says even just adding it in, the lush applies even when the flour and the substances are added to the water, even without any kneading. But again, if there's no other alternative, one can add a liquid with a shinui based on Rabbi Yehuda. Again, Rabbi Yehuda who says that stage 1 isn't even lush, and if you do that with a shinui, so then it for sure would be okay. So let's say you can't make something before Shabbos; it'll spoil. You have to make it for a child. So the Taz says one can make it on Shabbos, but again, do it with a shinui. The Taz, source number 30, Kivan the Efshar Lasso Zebe of Shabbos the Miskalkel Talmo Shel Snon. So you could Shavkua Ikar Al Hilchasa go like Meikar Adin the Halacha like Rabbi Yehuda. Just don't mix it with a strong koach, or just shake it in the kli. The Chazon Ish, preparing baby cereal. You can't prepare it before Shabbos. Sometimes you put it in the fridge; it's going to be cold. You have to make it right away with maybe even lukewarm water. So how do you prepare? So the Chazon Ish says even in the case maybe a blila ava. Even if it's blila ava, again, it's always better blila racha. Blila racha, because as Moses said to Rabbanan, and try to make everything blila racha, more liquidy. But in certain dire situations where, one needs it, this is the only thing a baby eats, then even a blila ava, not a blila ava straight out, that's a malacha daraisa, unless it's pikuach nefesh, but a blila ava with shinui, Because again, maybe that ruins the whole Tzurah Malacha. Shini is going to make it at most of the Rabbanan, and maybe if it removes the whole Tzurah of Lash, then it would be mutter. And that's what the Chazon Ish says in 31. When you're crushing fruit and you're adding some lemon juice, there's no issue of schita. We discussed it of lash because it is mashke abala ochel. You're squeezing the liquid onto a solid, therefore there's no issue there. Kivish akocha kebish mazonas latino kish lahakel kedas rov aposkim. What can be mako like the rov aposkim? Like as long as you don't use it you don't do it in the normal way. And there Aruch HaShabbos summarizes some of these halachas here on page 132. Amnam yesh mikrim b'hem hekilo aposkim shlo lachash l'shita anal hasoveres. Some say that in certain cases of need, we don't have to be choshesh for the shita that says just adding the liquid to the solid is going to be a problem, and therefore it will be mutter. Lachein daim yasa shini begibul. Only stage 2 is kneading, and if you do a shinui, then that would be okay. Even in certain cases, again, if push comes to shove, by blila ava. Amnam kasu aposkim to gam b'mikrim elu tov laso shini gam b'seidim v'seidim samayim lekemach. But you should try to do as many shinuis as possible. Put the opposite item in first. Ma'achal she'ef shalachina me'erev Shabbos. You can't prepare it by Erev Shabbos because time is kalkel, like the Taz. Then you could use shinuyim in the order and the way that you mix it. Mix it with a finger, mix it with shasi va'arev, right? That's cases where it will be ruined on Erev Shabbos. Or somebody's making tzorach machal hatinok, right? Or other types of cases, maybe even belila oven. Okay. Other types of shinuyim besides the one mentioned in the Gemara. The Gemara mentioned the order, but the Gemara also in Kuf Nun Vav suggests other types of shinuyim. Shesi va'arev, min na'aro lekli, maybe pouring it from one kli to another kli could also be a type of shinui. If I mix it very gently, that also is not something that is normally done. That's the Shabbos Daf Kuf Mem, lo yitrof ela ma'arev. Just mix it gently, the mustard and the honey. One can mix it gently. So all these are different types of shinuyim that are used that we should use. The Aruch HaShabbos towards the end summarizes some of these shinuyim as the sources were mentioned here on page 135, 136, and he mentions shini begibel yitachin bofanim aboim. He quotes different ideas. Lisha b'shesi va'arev. Back and forth, crisscross, and not in circles. Shelo ya'arev esa'isa kedarko, ela yachlis esa'kaf l'tochat haroves, v'yavir osa pamachas, shesi pamachas arev. One direction, the other direction. Take it out each time in between l'chadchila. Lisha ma'at, small amounts. Hamachal asher agilos lachino b'kamus meruba, yalush b'menu b'chol pam kamus mu'etes. Do a small amount. That's a little tricky because sometimes, as the Aruch HaShabbos says, what's the regular amount? Sometimes you're just making it for your own meal, so that's a tricky one to rely on. So we try to do with the other shinuyim in terms of how to knead. If you look in the end of this Shiur on Lash, he talks about the idea of amounts. He gets into issues of chatzi shiur. There's no chatzi shiur by the Malach of Lash. Okay, so lamaisa. Let's take everything that we've done and bring a lamaisa. Two cases. Practical examples of lush starting on page 137. Making mayonnaise on Shabbos. Sometimes people like to mix together mayonnaise. If one is going to end up with a very liquidy mayonnaise, like dripping, there's no issue. There's no issue of lush. Anything that's going to end up as a liquid. So then it's going to be thinner than you started off with. I know some people like to mix ketchup with oil. Anything that's going to end up thin, so then that's not a problem. But here, one is the Gemara mentioned before about mixing mustard and honey, but one shouldn't beat it in a forceful way. The Shiur Shabbos says when one is making mayonnaise, one should try to do that before Shabbos, but Rav Ovadia assumes that it is okay as long as one does it right before eating and one doesn't mix bekoach. One does a shinoi. Fine. Baby food. We mentioned baby food. The best to do is belila racha. If somebody could do it in a more liquidy, pourable form, that at most it's a derabanan, and then you use a shinui. If one can't, the baby won't eat it, and this is what the baby eats, and the Chazon Ish, as we saw before, and the Aruch HaShabbos quotes it here, then even by Blila Ava, there is some type of heter if one does it in a shinui way, unless he says that there's bread inside. He's against the bread being involved in the mixture. Kazav HaChazon Ish, the Aruch HaShabbos says now in 41, Shletzorach HaChanas Ma'achalam Latinok Efshar Lo Hakel Kishitas Rav HaPoskim. Rav HaPoskim who say that stage 1 is not a malacha, and then Mutar Lachan Avuro Machalam Apa Blila Ava Adesha Osa Shinu Begibul. Stage 1 is nothing, and stage 2, you do a shinui. Habalar mitz banana murusekes or batapuach, whatever it is you're making for the child, just use it, use a shinui. And again, one should really try not to do that if one doesn't need to. What about a powdered milk? So again, if somebody's powdered anything, if it's going to end up as a liquid, there's for sure not a problem. It's all liquid. That's what the Shiur Shabbos says in 42. Somebody's making chocolate milk. Somebody's making anything with shoko powder or anything that iced tea. So then with a mix, so then for sure that's not a problem. It's all liquid. That's not even blila racha. That's nothing. That's liquid. Mutar la'asosa k'moshe ragel b'mosachol bekafuf l'dinei bishul. Good. Rav Ribiad is one that talks about chocolate milk on the next page. Tchina. There are those that like to take raw tchina gomit, and mix it, and it ends up being more liquidy than you started. So l'chora, that should be mutter, because that's all the opposite of what lush is. Lush is making something thicker, and here it's the opposite of making a thick substance thinner. So l'chora, it shouldn't be a problem. The Shmir Shabbos thinks that one should still use a shinui, because first it becomes thicker, and then it becomes thinner. So the key is just to pour it all in right away, all the ingredients together, and then if one does that, then one avoids an initial thicker mixture. But again, that's what the Shmir Shabbos is worried about in 45. Ein lahaksiv b'Shabbos china gomit u'machal dalil shel kitnios. You shouldn't do that because it becomes aveh and then it becomes racha. Ulam b'shat hatzarach and yishpoch mitchila is called a mashkin. If one pours all the liquid in right away, ba'ofan shelo tisave b'chal blila ava, then it is mutter in that case. Also, Moshe Levi, the Menuchas Ava, also says that's mutter. But again, try to do a shinui. Try to do a shinui. Others say that you don't even have to do a shinui, but that's in terms of tchina. What about making pudding or jello on Shabbos? So again, if it's belila racha, so then just use a shinui. If you need to do this, again, everything's better to do before Shabbos. But if you need to do this, Rav Moshe says that if it's thick, it's belila av is going to be a problem. One has potato flakes or potato powder, instant mashed potatoes, ends up being thick. That's a problem. It's blila ava. So really, we try not to make that. If there's a real tzara gadol, so then one can make it with a shinoi, but one really should try not to. That's what the Rav Moshe and then the Rav Rimon also they bring here discusses that again, as long as you add in a lot of water initially, so it never gets to the stage of blila afa, that would be okay. The Shmir Shabbos thinks that based on a different Shulchan Aruch that by the powders, that's it's even a thin mixture could be a problem because it coalesces very easily, and the first second that it touches, it's mamish thick. It's not just like flour where slowly it starts coming together, and then you knead it, then it finishes the process. Here, by some of these instant powders, it coalesces the first second. There's fusion made, and therefore maybe that would be more chomor. But, not everyone. Others say that it depends what the final product is. Rav Avadia even allows jello to be made. Other poskim say maybe that's an issue of molid or nolad, as we discussed back in the malacha of squeezing and ice cubes in dash. But the Chazon Avadia here in 52, he says the initial mixture is only liquidy, and then memela it becomes thicker a few minutes later, and then the rest happens in the refrigerator. So it's a nolad molid issue. So he assumes that you might be able to do jello, but again, that's a chiddush. Not everybody agrees to that. Spreads, mixing spreads. We have that on page 143. So, meaning, what if you have two thick items? So is there going to be lush by two thick items? Usually, lush requires solid with a liquid medium. So Shmir Shabbos assumes maybe it could apply even to thicker items, but the Aruch Shabbos, which is most based on Rav Moshe, assumes that no. Says the Aruch Shabbos, page 50, source 54, on page 144, Shari lo matzinu isser lisha ela benosi mashke, o shar chomer hamadabik bekemach. It's only when there's liquid that's added to a solid. Right, that's it. I don't think if it's the same consistency, I don't think there's any lisha. And finally, the classic shalashudis preparations: eggplant salad, vegetable, tuna, egg salad. So eggplant salad, the Aruch Shabbos says it's l'chora not a problem because it is a problem because it's considered thick if it's eggplant and should be made only before Shabbos. If you made it before Shabbos and the oil rose to the top, as we saw before by the peanut butter, that's okay, because that's already a mixture from before Shabbos. That's chatzilim. The Aruch Shabbos says, if you have this salad chatzilim from beforehand, so then you're allowed to mix it. Mutter lachzer la'ariv as Hashem b'salat. That's not Isser of Lisha, because it's already part of the mixture. What about by, let's say, vegetable salad, as we saw, Israeli salad, that's not a problem. There are big pieces there. And in the footnote, that's coleslaw, potato salad. You see the pieces there. They're big pieces, and l'chorah, that is not a problem. Tuna and egg salad is more of an issue, because if you use that you add some type of oil as a binder, or you add mayonnaise, so that should really be done with a shinoi. If one can make the tuna and the egg salad before Shabbos, that's best. But if not, so then do a shinui, whatever you put in first. Usually I would say people put in the tuna fish before the mayonnaise. So you put the mayonnaise in first, and then put in the tuna. You put some oil in the bowl first, and then you put in the egg salad. Just use a shinui, and that would be okay. Says the Shabbos Kitchen. Chopped egg or tuna salad may be combined with mayonnaise in the usual order. However, I take it back by the mayonnaise case, because there, even Rabbi Yehuda, who says even according to Rebbe, who says stage 1 is usher, that's only where there is a liquid that starts the bonding. Mayonnaise does nothing at stage 1. You put mayonnaise into tuna, nothing happens unless you start mixing it. So therefore, regarding the mayonnaise, the oil in the egg salad, fine, but the mayonnaise that there's no shinu needed there. But the second stage is. However, it must be mixed with crisscross strokes or with a bare hand. Mixing with a knife or with a handle of a utensil is not permitted. Right? The Shabbos Kitchen assumes that is still normal. Same holds true when adding egg or tuna, vegetable bits into a completed salad. The new pieces only a crisscross, if they're tiny little pieces. But if they're bigger pieces, like a regular Israeli salad, then there wouldn't be any malacha of lush. Okay, Rabosai, this took us through lush. So we did borer, tochen, and lush. Those are really a unit. This takes us through third shiur in this volume. We continue next time with other food preparation ideas and malachas.